Welcome to USA Hemp Revival, where we tell you what the news left out as far as the coverage of the Cannabis Study Committee.
Georgia lawmakers met once again to talk about expanding the state's medical marijuana program. Patients and their families say the state has a long way to go to perfect it. Atlanta News First political reporter Doug Reardon is live in Midtown. And Doug, it is still a very limited system.
Well, very limited, Tracy. There are currently only 17 conditions here in Georgia that will grant you access to a medicinal marijuana card. That meeting today was out in Macon, but families here in Atlanta tell me they are hopeful that lawmakers will expand it so that they can gain access. And not just who can gain access to this program, but also how. For a second time this year, a special committee of lawmakers looking into expanding the state's medical marijuana program convened. Practitioners like Atlanta-based Dr. Elmore Alexander, who prescribes cannabis as medicine, were watching closely.
We're very limited in Georgia, which is a little limiting for physicians because we have patients who have all types of conditions.
Right now, the state allows patients with 17 conditions access to medicinal marijuana, mostly end-stage cancer, chronic pain sufferers, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, and PTSD, to name a few. And they can only get it in the form of THC oil and edibles. Dr. Alexander wants lawmakers to consider expanding the list of conditions.
There's so many people who are not in stage, but they can benefit from these medications.
And allowing patients to vape or smoke marijuana as treatment. And he is not alone. Corey Lowe's daughter, Victoria, is prone to chronic seizures, has been from birth. Despite Corey lobbying for expanded marijuana laws since 2014, they just got their medical card for Victoria recently. For her, the level of oil allowed in the state isn't enough, and she wants anyone who needs marijuana as medicine in any form to have that access.
We don't get to pick our condition. No one gets to choose. So I don't feel like the lawmakers should choose what condition this medicine helps.
Others at Thursday's meeting cautioned lawmakers to be thoughtful about expanding access to marijuana in any form.
I do have compassion for the people who are getting benefits from marijuana. I also have compassion for toddlers who are being hospitalized for THC poisoning, for youth with cannabis-induced psychosis.
Yeah, it really does suck that this can happen to children when it's used or consumed in the wrong way. Yeah, when it's that there's a reason why there is a law saying only 21 and up. How are these teens getting into it? You know, do they have enough love in their life? Do they have enough connection? Are they hopeless? Is there too much EMF? Is there too much LED? You know, let's not blame a beautiful sacred plant for their issues just because they're not being responsible for it. And I have a lot of compassion for all of the lack of education which is causing this. And I believe in the power of healing with truth and knowledge and love. And I hope everything comes back into balance.
I need to look down and read this because someone on my board wrote it. And I'm employed by them.
I have compassion for people who are peanut farmers, but I also have compassion for people who go into anaphylactic shock and kids who are hospitalized for peanut allergies, and therefore I think we should have a peanut prohibition. I have compassion for people who want to clean their cars with cleaning stuff, but I also have compassion for babies who have been hospitalized for drinking Windex. And I have compassion for the world that wants to exist with bees, because, you know, we won't exist without bees. But I also have compassion for everyone who gets stung by bees. And let's look at the statistics. How many people were stung by a bee? That's a lot. And how many of them went into anaphylactic shock? That's a lot. Therefore, I am for a bee prohibition.
And lawmakers last session got about as close as you can get to passing a bill that would have essentially tackled all of this, but it was pulled from the floor on the last day of session. It will still be there for them to take up when they arrive back to the State House for the next Legislative General Assembly. We're in Midtown. Doug Reardon, Atlanta News First.
First of all, it was extremely monumental that someone who actually had a master's in cannabis science was invited to be a featured speaker. That's right, she had more than 1 or 2 minutes to speak, and her presentation was absolutely fabulous. Here is a snippet.
I do want to go over a little bit of the history of cannabis, and I'll first start off with the ancient history. So one of the things I say is that plant medicine has been the predominant source of medicines throughout the vast majority of human history. Now understand that there's very rich history, but it's all not discussed. And I could spend all day, but I won't, on talking about the history of cannabis. But I want to say that the DNA for cannabis dates back to 27.8 billion years ago in archaeological specimens, and further there's evidence of human medicine use in the early Copper Age in 4600 to 3000 BCE. So cannabis was widely used by nomads. It was used by Egyptians, Romans, Chinese for various ailments, treatments of malaria, snake bites, blood poisoning, childbirth, toothaches, and so forth. Now, moving forward just a little bit, I want to look at some modern history. There are some things in here that were very important to me. We have done an about face. There's from the practice from historical use. So in 1943, cannabis was removed from the U.S. pharmacopoeia, and physicians were prohibited from prescribing. So now you know now that they cannot prescribe it, they can only recommend. But up until 1943, it was in that book that lists all the drugs that providers are able to prescribe, and it was removed in 1943. And one other thing here, in 2003, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services was issued a patent for cannabinoids as antioxidant and neuroprotectants for chronic neurodegenerative disease. Now, this is the great hypocrisy to me. The FDA holds a patent while it still maintains its Schedule I classification.
Now for Channel 13 coverage.
Today in Macon, families and patients made emotional pleas for Georgia to expand medical cannabis access. They spoke at the Georgia House Committee hearing at Mercer University.
The committee was formed after a bill expanding access to medical cannabis stalled in the state legislature this past session. Hunter King spoke with advocates as they talked about their personal struggles under the current law.
Just to clarify, this study committee is about all cannabis policy here in Georgia, not just medical and not just about one bill. Legislators have even come forward testifying that they will introduce legalization legislation for the whole plant.
Georgians should know that they have a government that's working for them in every aspect and will empower them with the options that they should have, especially when it comes to health care. We should be leading this conversation around medicinal. We know that it works. We've been doing exceptionally well with the 8,000 Georgians who have medicinal cards. We know that we have subject matter experts that deals with hemp. Georgia should have a bill in which I will introduce next session that spells out from a medicinal, recreational, and retail, from a legalization and a decriminalization perspective. So it's great that the Georgia House Blue Ribbon Committee they're meeting today. They're listening to our constituents. They're listening to subject matter experts. But we need to have a comprehensive bill to spell this out, so that way we can demystify the confusion and empower the citizens in Georgia.
And many hemp businesses have come forward expressing suffering for recent legislation banning the plant flower and leaf.
The room was full on Thursday as about a dozen people shared their stories with lawmakers. Former State Representative Micah Gravely says his 74-year-old father is battling cancer and undergoing preventative chemotherapy that has left him weak and without appetite.
To see the weight loss and to see just kind of the lack of energy and the loss of appetite, it was really concerning as someone who worked very hard during my time in the legislature to help people like that.
Gravely says Georgia's current law forces patients to wait until their conditions become severe or end stage before they're allowed to buy medical cannabis.
If I get diagnosed with something and I know that medical cannabis can help, I want to be able to take that immediately.
Jennifer Conforti says her 14-year-old daughter was diagnosed with a brain defect and profound autism. At age 3, the girl developed severely harmful behaviors.
I was able to get her off of her pharmaceuticals and only on cannabis, and she's been taking cannabis every day for the last, 11 years.
Conforti says most parents in the special needs community don't know medical cannabis dispensaries exist in Georgia. Advocates also warn that restrictive laws force patients to seek dangerous alternatives on the street, like products that could contain fentanyl. The committee said they will gather testimony and presentations from their meeting around the state and make recommendations to the Assembly this year. Reporting in Macon, Hunter King, 13 WMAZ News.
According to the Georgia Access to Medical Cannabis Commission, Georgia's law is much more restrictive than in some other states. It doesn't allow growing or selling marijuana in plant or leaf form or allow doctors to prescribe it.
Actually, just to butt in here for a minute, as Angela mentioned in her testimony, no doctors anywhere can prescribe this because it was taken out of the medical prescribing booklet. It can only be recommended. Kind of like diet, you know? Like maybe you should go eat some broccoli. Maybe you should get some fresh air. Maybe you should take Kung Fu. All those are just recommendations, not prescriptions. Although I think with NDD, you can prescribe a walk in the woods. But fact check me.
It also bans the use of food products infused with low THC oil.
Medical marijuana use has been legal in the state for the past 10 years after legislators passed the Haley's Hope Act. It was inspired by then 4-year-old Haley Cox, who suffers from epilepsy. Since 2015, lawmakers have spent several years working to make medical marijuana more accessible for those who need it.
Ironically, Haley, who the law was named after, can't even come to Georgia with her medicine that is not legal here, and so stays in Colorado.
In the most recent legislative session, Georgia lawmakers proposed Senate Bill 220, also known as the Putting Georgia's Patients First Act, to help expand the program, but that bill never made it through and did not become law. The bill would have renamed low THC oil to medical cannabis, removed severe or end-stage requirements for certain conditions, and opened access for several other medical conditions. That bill is expected to carry over into the 2026 legislative session.
Actually, many other bills, like the aroma bill, never got a committee vote. Track all the cannabis bills with the webpage linked below. And you can find a link to that webpage from usahemprevival.com.
Just because your money's not there, it doesn't mean your dreams are just air.
Thank you so much for watching this video. Please like, comment, and subscribe. See you in the next one.